Buddy Son Story Time.
The Three Little Pigs. Illustrated by Giuseppe de Lernia. Written and retold by Clare, Lloyd. On the edge of a beautiful forest lived a mommy pig, a daddy pig, and 3 little pigs. The time had come for the 3 little pigs to leave home. "Watch out for the big bad wolf," warned the daddy pig as he waved goodbye. The 3 little pigs hadn't walked far when the first little pig grew tired.
"This will do,"
yawned the lazy little pig. He quickly built a house from straw that was laying nearby. It wasn't long before the second little pig stopped walking and looked around her.
"This will do,"
she said, and swiftly built a house from the sticks and branches that were scattered around her. The third little pig walked on and on and on. Finally, he found a pretty area of land by a stream. It was the perfect place to build his house. The third little pig decided to build a strong brick house to keep him safe from the wolf. He drew plans. He bought the best bricks he could find. And finally, after weeks of hard work, he stood back and admired his beautiful new home.
Wow!
Meanwhile, the hungry, big bad wolf came across the first little pig resting in his house of straw. Little pig, let me come in," said the wolf.
"Not by the hair on my tinny tin tin,"
cried the first little pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," howled the hungry wolf. So the big bad wolf huffed and he puffed, and the tiny straw house came tumbling down. The little pig ran as fast as he could until he arrived at the house made of sticks. The big bad wolf snuck up to the house. Little pigs, let me come in," he growled.
"Not by the hair on our tinny tin tin,"
cried the frightened little pigs. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," howled the hungry wolf. So the big bad wolf huffed and he puffed, and the wobbly stick house came tumbling down. The 2 little pigs ran on and on and on until they finally reached the third little pig's house.
"Don't worry, we are safe in a strong brick house,"
said the third little pig as they heard a bang at the door. Little pigs, let me come in," said a familiar voice. It was the wolf.
"Not by the hairs on our chinny chin chins,"
cried the 3 little pigs. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," howled the hungry wolf. So the big bad wolf huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed. But nothing happened. The house didn't even wobble. The wolf was furious and very hungry. He climbed up onto the roof and jumped down the chimney. Splash! Ow! The wolf landed in a pot of boiling hot soup and burned his long furry tail on the fire. He leapt out of the chimney and ran away as quickly as he could. As for the little pigs, they lived happily ever after in their house made of bricks. They never, ever saw the big bad wolf again. The end. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Retold by B.G. Hennessy. Illustrated by Boris, Kulikov. There was once a shepherd.
I am so bored,
He thought.
all day long. All I do is watch sheep. All the sheep do is eat. Not only that, all they say is baa.
Munch, munch, munch. Bah, answered the sheep.
Nothing ever happens here. None of my friends come to play. I am the most bored boy in the world,
Thought the shepherd. Munch, munch, munch. Bah, answered the sheep.
I wonder if sheep ever get bored.
He thought. He decided to teach the sheep some tricks. He expected the sheep would be happy to learn something new, but none of them seemed interested. Munch, munch, munch. Bah, the sheep protested.
What I need is a little excitement,
Said the shepherd.
Well, what would be exciting? I know.
He said. The shepherd boy jumped up from under his tree in the pasture and ran all the way into town, yelling,
Wolf! 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 There is a wolf after my sheep.
All of the townsfolk came running as fast as they could to help the shepherd boy protect his sheep. They looked everywhere for the wolf. No wolf in the pasture. No wolf on the hill. No wolf in the forest. One of the shepherd boy's friends stayed with him for the rest of the day to make sure the wolf was really gone,
That was a fun afternoon.
thought the shepherd boy. But the next day, munch, munch, munch. Bah. Life in the pasture was back to boring again. So, the shepherd boy jumped up from under his tree in the pasture and ran into town, this time yelling,
Wolves! 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 There are 2 wolves after my sheep.
And just like the day before, everyone came running lickety-split to help the shepherd boy protect his sheep. And just like the day before, they looked everywhere for the wolves. No wolves in the pasture, no wolves on the hill, no wolves in the forest.
They must have run away.
The shepherd explained. One of the boy's friends stayed with him for the rest of the day, this time to see if there really was a wolf.
That was another fine afternoon,
Thought the shepherd boy after his friend had left. The next day, just when the shepherd boy was beginning to get bored again, he heard, Lunch, lunch, lunch. Grrr. And lunch, lunch, lunch. Grrr. And lunch, lunch, lunch. Grrr. And there, by the edge of the pasture, were 3 big, hungry wolves. The sheep started running in all directions. And for the 3rd time, the shepherd jumped up from under his tree in the pasture and ran into town, this time yelling,
Wolves! 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 There are 3 wolves after my sheep.
But this time, no one came to help. This time, no one believed him. And the shepherd boy spent the rest of the day looking for his sheep, all by himself.
Oh.
The end.
Little Red Riding Hood.
By Candice, Ransom. Illustrated by Tammie, Lyon. A long time ago, there lived a sweet little girl who was thoughtful and kind and loved to visit her grandmother. Her grandmother enjoyed the visit so much that she gave the little girl a special present. She sewed the girl a wool cape with a hood. It was the girl's favorite color, a wonderful cherry red. The girl liked her cape so much that she wore it everywhere. Yay! First, she wore it to the village store. Then, she wore it to visit her cousins on the other side of the village. She even wore her cape to bed. Soon, everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Your grandmother isn't feeling well,"
I'll go visit her,
said Little Red Riding Hood.
and I'll take a picnic.
"What a good idea," said Little Red Riding Hood's mother. "And be sure to stay on the path through the woods." Little Red Riding Hood promised that she would, and she packed a basket with her grandmother's favorite foods and set off. Little Red Riding Hood skipped down the long, winding path as she always did on her visits, and she was very careful to always stay on the path. After a while, she met a wolf. "Hello," said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood knew she shouldn't talk to the wolf, but he seemed friendly.
Hello.
She said. "Where are you going this fine day, little girl?" asked the wolf.
I'm going to visit my grandmother.
Said Little Red Riding Hood.
She isn't feeling well, so I'm bringing her this picnic with her favorite foods.
"And where does your grandmother live?" asked the wolf.
At the end of this path.
A sly grin came over the wolf's face. He knew that if he ran up the hill, he'd get to the grandmother's house before Little Red Riding Hood. "I'll gobble up the old lady and the little girl," he thought, smacking his lips. "And I'll gobble up that tasty picnic too. Nom 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 nom. Look at all the flowers growing in the woods," said the crafty wolf. "Why don't you pick some for your grandmother? Pretty flowers will make her feel even better."
Good idea,
said Little Red Riding Hood. The prettiest flowers were far from the path, but Little Red Riding Hood thought it would be all right to leave the path just this once. When she turned to pick some flowers, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house. The door was unlocked, so the wolf opened it quietly and crept inside. He tiptoed into the grandmother's bedroom and found her asleep in bed. Suddenly, she woke up. When she saw the wolf, she screamed. "Help! Help!" cried Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. The wolf grabbed her, pushed her into the closet, and locked the door. "Be quiet," he said, "or I'll gobble you up now instead of later." The wolf quickly put on a nightgown and a cap. He hopped into bed and pulled the covers up to his hairy chin. At that moment, Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the front door.
Grandmother!
She called. "Come in, my dear," said the wolf in a high voice. Little Red Riding Hood went into the bedroom. She stared at her grandmother lying in bed. Her grandmother looked very strange, and Little Red Riding Hood was afraid.
Grandmother, what big ears you have!
Said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf.
Grandmother, what big eyes you have!
Said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to see you with, my dear," said the wolf.
Grandmother, what big hands you have!
Said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to hug you with, my dear."
Grandmother, what big teeth you have!
Said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to eat you with," cried the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood screamed. This was not her grandmother. It was the wolf. Suddenly, the wolf sprang out of bed He tried to grab Little Red Riding Hood, but she leaped away, light as a leaf in her cherry red cape. The wolf grabbed the air instead. With a yelp, the wolf tumbled out the window and rolled head over heels down the hill. He was never seen again. Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother pounded on the closet door. Little Red Riding Hood let her out, and they hugged as tightly as they could. "Thank goodness that's over with," said her grandmother. "What happened?"
Mother said you were sick,
said Little Red Riding Hood.
so I brought you a picnic lunch, but I left the path to pick flowers.
"Well, I think you learned your lesson," said her grandmother. "I'm just glad we're both safe." Then Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother sat down and enjoyed their visit together. It was the best one they'd ever had.